This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
AI just got faster, more accessible, and cheaper, all in the same week, but there's a good chance you might have missed all of it. I mean, let's see what happened just recently. Google dropped its new Gemini 3.7 Flash at half the price of the version that they just released 3 weeks ago. Then Elon Musk's team shipped a smarter GROC at the exact same price. And OpenAI answered with a new mode that runs its most powerful model 14 times faster. I mean, I still don't even know how that's even possible. But here's why you should care even if you've never touched an API. Because price and speed are the two things standing between AI demos and AI that actually is running inside of your business. Because every time one of those two things drops, a use case that didn't make sense last month suddenly makes a ton of sense. And that was just the model news. I mean, Claude started working inside your browser tabs. Your spreadsheets can now turn themselves into live dashboards. And ChatGPT quietly shipped a feature that watches everything you do on your Mac. And I'm here for it. So that's why on Fridays, we bring you Friday Features, our weekly update of the latest AI features that you can actually use today, not announcements, teasers. Yeah, you can go use all these things right now. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to Everyday AI. If you're new here, my name's Jordan Wilson, and we do this every day. It's a daily, unedited, unscripted live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping business leaders like you and me not just keep up with everything that's happening, but I tell you what matters, what doesn't, how to use it, and you take that information to grow your company and your career. All of a sudden, it's like, whoa, you're the smartest person in AI. Everyone's looking at you like, what's your secret? Well, your secret is this, but also our website, youreverydayai.com. So if you didn't know, you can go check that out. We have literally 830 plus episodes you can go watch, listen to, and read about, all for free. It is a free generative AI university on our website. So let's get into it on today's show. Here's what you're going to learn. You're going to know the new Mac feature that watches everything you do at work, then tells you what you did all day and maybe finishes the work that you forgot to do. You're going to know why the smartest cheap model in AI just got 50% cheaper, and the catch that's hiding in the fine print. And you're going to know how Claude can now do real work inside your browser tabs, login, and all. All right, so let's take a look. Actually, live stream audience, haven't shouted you out in a bit. Big bogey face, good to see you. Brent joining us from London, Brian from Minnesota, Jose joining us from Santiago. Miko joining us from Tokyo. We're all over the place this morning. Love to see it. Michelle, good to see you join us. All right. A lot of new AI features, y'all. So on Fridays, it's one of my favorite shows, and it's actually been one of our more listened to shows because it's hard to keep up. And some of these things, literally, I had the show planned last night, woke up this morning. I'm like, all right, there's already new things. You know, some things had to get the cut, right? It's kind of crazy because there's some big updates this week that didn't even make our top 7. I mean, let me just read these before we get into the ones we're actually going to cover. I mean, the Microsoft Copilot started unifying its Copilot offerings into the super app. So that's actually happening. Wasn't even a top 7 thing. ChatGPT upgraded its voice mode to include projects and file uploads, which is pretty big. I've been using that one a lot since it came out. Google Gemini released 13 new connectors, and Google also released a slew of new AI features for Google Ads and Google Analytics. So let's get into the ones that we're actually going to be covering today. And let's start with, well, if you care specifically about the fastest, cheapest model that is still the most intelligent, technically, if you look at things like artificial analysis, they actually have a nice little model filter. And if you say those are the 3 things that are most important for you, the new Gemini 3.7 Flash is the recommended model. So it is brand new. And if you're wondering, like, wait, Jordan, didn't you just cover this new Gemini Flash like very recently? Yeah, 3 weeks ago. That's how long it took Google to go from Gemini 3.6 Flash to Gemini 3.7 Flash. So let's see what's new. Google released Gemini 3.7 Flash, its new AI model that it calls the most intelligent workhorse model for coding and agents. And it's a big step up from the version released just 3 weeks ago with major gains in coding, debugging, and building web apps. So, who has access to this? If you're a paid subscriber, it's available already. So, interestingly enough, it's not yet available inside of Google Gemini, right? So, gemini.google.com, but it is available in its Gemini Spark model, which is available, the kind of agentic offering for Google, which is available in Gemini. I know that's a little confusing, but if you go into Google's AI Studio, it's in there, as well as Android Studio and the Gemini API and Gemini Enterprise platform. So yeah, if you're a normal paid Gemini user, which is, I think, the majority of our listeners, and you go in there, you're not going to find it there, but it is powering the Gemini Spark. And if you're using Google Anti-Gravity, so many different ways that you can access Google's AI. It's like you need a roadmap sometimes. All right, but here's the key thing. API pricing is 75 cents per million input tokens and $3.75 per million output tokens. All right, so let's read just quick kind of what Google said about their newest release. Let me zoom in on my browser here. Apparently, I'm old and can barely see. All right, so Google says today we're building on the progress of our widely used Flash series by introducing Gemini 3.7 Flash, our most intelligent workhorse model yet for coding and agents. The release comes just 3 weeks after Gemini 3.6 Flash and is a direct result of developer feedback and algorithmic innovations that we look forward to bringing to future models. 3.7 Flash delivers substantial improvements across software engineering, knowledge work, and web development workflows with an introductory price of half of the original 3.6 Flash cost per million tokens. So if you recall, when Gemini 3.6 Flash came out, I said, I don't understand this model because the whole point of the Flash series all along from Google has been to be extremely fast and extremely cheap. And Gemini 3.6 Flash, although it was fast-ish, it was not cheap, right? It was not its normal, you would look at Gemini's Flash series and be like, all right, this is, not like free, but this is a very low-cost model that you can put out at scale. So unfortunately, I think a lot of people were upset at Gemini 3.6 Flash because it wasn't really that. Gemini 3.7 Flash gets back to exactly that. So who's gonna find this useful? Well, it's useful because it got smarter, faster, and the price cut in half. Again, that's if you're paying on the API side. But the real thing is inside Google Gemini Spark. So if you haven't used Spark, that's kind of their new-ish autonomous coding agent that is inside of Google Gemini. So it's kind of a mode. It's an agentic mode inside of Google Gemini. So for that, it's going to make, I think, a big difference. So I tested out Gemini Spark. I wasn't super impressed, when it first came out to paid plans, mainly just because I've been using, Codex and, Claude Code, Claude Cowork for so long. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really seeing anything that I can't do inside of those. But now with a better model, I think some people are going to find it much more valuable. So who's going to find this valuable? Well, if you're a business using AI on high via the API, this might be your new workhorse model, right? People don't really understand from a serving tokens perspective. Google is and has always been a leader in the space, right? Even if you don't see a lot of people talking about the Gemini chatbot, when it comes to serving up tokens, right? Google has been a leader and will continue to. All right. Stephen Leitz says he's been waiting for this one. All right. Hopefully you enjoy Gemini 3.7 Flash. All right. Let's get into our next one. And this is the one that just came out a couple hours ago. So yeah, we may have a new king of the open source hill. Yeah, we don't even have full benchmarks for it. So we don't know if it's going to truly be the best open weights model in the world, but it might be. That's because we have a new version of ZAI's GLM-5.3. So a new model it's calling its best yet for coding and the strongest open weights coding models that it has measured. So an interesting wrinkle, it's the same underlying model as GLM 5.2, but every single gain just comes from better post-training. So yeah, not like a completely new model per se. This is more of a step change that's very
Are you still running in circles trying to figure out how to actually grow your business with AI? Maybe your company has been tinkering with large language models for a year or more, but can't really get traction to find ROI on Gen AI. Hey, this is Jordan Wilson, host of this very podcast. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, and NVIDIA have partnered with us because they trust our expertise in educating the masses around generative AI to get ahead. And some of the most innovative companies in the country hire us to help with their AI strategy and to train hundreds of their employees on how to use Gen AI. So whether you're looking for ChatGPT training for thousands or just need help building your front-end AI strategy, you can partner with us too, just like some of the biggest companies in the world do. Go to youreverydayai.com/partner to get in contact with our team, or you can just click on the partner section of our website. We'll help you stop running in those AI circles and help get your team ahead and build a straight path to ROI on Gen AI.
very normal. But the big surprise here and the big jump, at least according to ZAI's benchmarks, like I said, it's too fresh to have any third-party benchmarks yet. Big jump is cybersecurity. So ZAI says the model got better at finding and chaining software vulnerabilities than the company intended, and it has already found over 1,000 critical security flaws in real software like Linux and Apple's WebKit. Yeah, ones that have already, according to ZAI, withstood, the Fable and the GPT-5.6, vulnerabilities that everyone has found. The thing that's interesting here, so for our live stream audience, I have kind of their blog post announcement up on my screen. You can always watch the video version of our podcast on youreverydayai.com, as well as you can go catch that link in the show notes. But the interesting thing was, some of these benches, right? I mean, they're definitely competing with the closed source proprietary models, specifically, Fable 5 from Anthropic and GPT-5.6 Sol. So the one that really stood out is CyberGem. All right. So this is kind of a metric on the cybersecurity side, which is very important. I talked about that, this week. Was that this week that I had my, my Rogue AI agent show? It's all blending together now. But, let's go back to when Anthropic teased its Mythos and Fable models, and then they sat on it, didn't release it for like 3 months. The main benchmark that it led with was CyberGem. All right. And right now, it is a pretty important benchmark, CyberGem and ExploitGem. But for CyberGem, this new open model is the best in the world, right? Which is crazy, right? Yeah, an open model that is the best. So it scored an 84.5 on CyberGem, ahead of the other two models that were kind of tied there for first place previously, which is Fable 5 and GPT-5.6 Sol. So a little bit more about GLM 5.3 and who has access. Well, it's available to everyone now. So if you are on ZAI's GLM coding plan, or if you have their Z code installed, which Z code is pretty much just a pixel per pixel copy of Codex anyways. Well, if you use Codex and you're like, oh, I want to try this new GLM 5.2, you can try Z code, and it's pretty much the same thing as Codex, but it's been rolled out to all subscribers. So the open weights are not out yet. All right. So ZAI says it will release them in about 2 weeks after further safety testing. So calling it open source today is a little premature. It will be open weights. And we at least know that ZAI has a positive track record of doing this. This is what happened with GLM 5.2. This is what happened with Kimi K3, with Quen 3.8, all the Chinese open models they've released, and then they usually will release the weights, in about 2 weeks. So technically, the weights are not available today if you're a super dork and care about those things, but they will be available soon. So why is this useful? Well, it's been a budget favorite. So the GLM coding plan has been a budget favorite for AI coding, and this makes the budget option meaningfully better at complex, long-running tasks. So the company said on its own tests, it's roughly 50% better at coding than the last version, which is crazy. And if you recall back a couple of months when GLM 5.2 was released, this was kind of the first open model that people started to look at and say, wait, has China kind of closed the gap on US frontier proprietary closed models? And it was like, kind of, right? I think before it was always, US models were tier one and Chinese open models were tier two. So the US models are still ahead, but it's 1A and 1B with the Chinese open models. So GLM, Kimi K3, and Quen 3.8 are probably in that 1B tier with, Anthropic's Opus 5 and Fable 5, along with OpenAI's GPT 5.6 Soul are kind of still in that 1A tier by themselves. So pretty interesting now. Yeah, Josh here on YouTube, good comment, said actually OpenAI now has new cybersecurity daybreak blue and red. That is correct. They rolled that out earlier this week. If you read our newsletter, you caught that as well. All right, more new models. Do you see a pattern here? A lot of new models this week. They're coming out faster and faster than ever. In this one, I was kind of surprised with. GROC 4.6 is actually a pretty good model, right? It's probably joined that 1B tier, all of a sudden it is a top contender. So let's talk about what's new in the model. So SpaceX AI, yes, formerly XAI, they just jammed all the names together, but the real name is SpaceX AI, released GROC 4.6, its newest top tier AI model built for coding and long running automated tasks. So on a widely watched independent scorecard that is in a lot of the benchmarks that artificial analysis covers, it now ties OpenAI's GPT 5.6 Soul in a lot of important benchmarks and jumped 5 points over the previous GROC. So yeah, on artificial analysis index, it is right there neck and neck with GPT 5.6 Soul. So, who has access to this right now? Well, developers have it available through the XAI API, and it's also included in the coding tool Cursor on all plans. So, yeah, Cursor, obviously, SpaceX AI acquired Cursor. So this is available if you are on a Cursor plan as well. It's also now the default model in GROC build, which is, XAI's attempt at building a Codex or Claude Code competitor. So why is it useful? Well, the price didn't change from the last version of GROC. So anyone using GROC got a smarter model for the same money if you are paying per tokens. But the biggest thing is this keeps the price war alive because the jump from GROC 4.5 to 4.6 was huge, right? Maybe some of that compute that the company has been investing in and the Cursor acquisition is starting to pay off in a model that maybe now companies will start to look at. I'm kind of surprised maybe that SpaceX AI isn't just going with the Cursor brand name and going with, Composer 3 or something like that. I will say this, and this isn't my own personal bias. This is just literally anyone on the internet. I think because of some of the areas that GROC has made a niche in, people from a business perspective, when it comes to paying, tokens, they're not always looking at GROC as a competitor. They're like, oh, this is the one that's, been doing some, wild things on the internet. So we'll see if now, GROC 4.6 kind of teetering between that 1B and 1A tier changes that. But here is what the company said in its release. It said, today we are releasing GROC 4.6. GROC 4.6 builds on GROC 4.5 with a particular focus on long-running agents and more ambitious interactive and visual work. It stays with complex tasks across many steps, whether researching a topic, analyzing information, working across a code base, or turning an idea into a polished application or work artifact. The other thing that's kind of related to this GROC 4.6, and we won't be covering this on today's Friday features, even though I would have liked to, but it's only available on the very expensive GROC and Cursor plans. But the new GROC bot, which does look exciting, and I'm looking forward to it being released on the standard base plan. So yeah, on the Friday show, we're usually not covering things that are only exclusively on the, $200 or $300 plans, which is GROC bot for now. But GROC bot is powered by GROC 4.6. So pretty big week of releases from the SpaceX/GROC/Cursor teams. All right, let's move on to our next one. And this one, I don't know. I'm a Google Sheets dork. So maybe I'm more excited about this one than the average person. But yeah, Canvas mode, one of my favorite modes of all time from Google Gemini, is coming and it's here inside of Google Sheets. So let's talk about this feature you can go use right now. Google expanded access to its Sheets canvas, a feature that turns a plain spreadsheet into an interactive dashboard. So, yeah, any Google Sheet that you have inside of Google Sheets now, you can literally turn it into an app, which is really cool, right? So this is, at least for me and for a lot of people, all this technically does is cut down on, 2 or 3 little steps in between. Before, I would just take my Google Sheet, download it, export it, or connect it inside, Codex, Claude Code, or even Google Gemini, the chatbot side, and then go ahead and, build a little app or dashboard. But now you can do it all inside Google Sheets without leaving. So yeah, it can just build a working mini app on top of your data that stays in sync and it updates as that data changes. So who has access to this? Any paid subscribers for Google Gemini, you have access to it. It is literally just inside of the right panel. So just go click that Gemini button inside Google Sheets. In plain language, say turn this into an app that does A, B, and C, and it's done for you. Also, now if you have a Gemini work or school account, it's also available. All right, so why is this useful? Well, building a decent dashboard in Sheets used to mean a lot, right? So if you're just looking at building, graphs and charts, yeah, you have to kind of know the formulas or some formatting hacks or use a separate business intelligence tool. Now you just type build me a sales pipeline board and it builds one. All right, so the spreadsheet sheet though stays as your source of truth. And here's the kind of the unlock, at least for me personally, right? The thing, most people, if you work a lot in Google Sheets, you know this, but Google Sheets is notoriously good at connecting with all of your different data sources. So, I don't know if you have, a MailChimp list or if you have a ads going in Meta, whatever it is, right? So many of these platforms sync directly with Google Sheets. So when you can say, if you set something up once, and then you can build the app inside of Google Sheets, and then if the data is syncing live, you can build a nice little app once and never have to update it again. And you can go in and it's updated every single day. So this is kind of similar to I would say a light version of like ChatGPT sites or the live artifacts feature inside of Claude Code. All right, speaking of Claude, all right, they took a page out of the Codex book and essentially the very good ChatGPT Chrome extension that we covered here a couple of weeks ago. Now the exact same thing is available, but for Claude, essentially bringing the power of Claude Cowork into the Chrome side panel. So here's, let's actually start with what Anthropic says. It says the Claude in Chrome side panel is now a Claude Cowork session. Conversations are saved to your history, your skills and connectors work in the browser, and a task you start in a tab can be finished on the Claude desktop, web, and mobile apps. It's available on Max and Team plans today and is rolling out to pro users over the coming weeks. All right, so here's kind of the gist. So essentially, a task that you start in a Chrome tab can now be picked up and finished in the Claude desktop if you're using Claude Cowork. So it is a Cowork to Cowork sync as far as my tests show. Yeah, right. Still, one of the big downsides of Claude Code, Claude Desktop in general, is Claude Cowork has no idea what Claude Code is doing. Claude Code has no idea what Claude Chat on the desktop is doing, and vice versa. So there are 3 very different silos, which is unfortunate. So the Claude Chrome extension here that works with Claude Cowork is just with Claude Cowork. So the exact same functionality has been out for about a month now with the ChatGPT sidebar, and then that one is unified and it works whether you're using the chat panel or the work panel. But regardless, a big step up for Claude users. Here's why it's useful. Well, Claude can now see the page that you're on and act on it, and then obviously sync that session Cowork to Cowork. So everything from clicking, typing, filling forms, and using your existing logins. That's the big unlock there. So that means it can work in the tools that don't already connect to AI via direct connectors or MCPs like your vendor portals or just, internal dashboards that are, a little more antiquated and don't have, all that, fun updated AI connections. So now, Claude Cowork, just go around, click around, and use computer use inside your browser via the updated Chrome extension. So who's going to find this valuable? I mean, anyone, if you're a heavy Claude user, and you still have to use the internet a lot, right? That's the big thing. I always say first, always check directly integrated connectors or integrations. Second, see if whatever app that you're using has an MCP or Model Context Protocol that's supported in Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, etc. And if it doesn't have one of those two things, that's where something like this new Claude in Chrome, Claude Cowork extension really comes in handy, because for all of the other, probably 90% of the internet that can't talk directly, to your Claude Cowork, this new extension will at least allow it to understand and use the interface. So yeah, I think anyone is going to like this. If you had those, annoying tools, or that you're like, oh man, this app that I use, that's a big part of my job, there's no AI integration. Well, now at least Claude Cowork in Chrome can use it. All right, we have two more, and both of these are from OpenAI. So this one has been talked about for a while. It was supposed to be released in July, so an extra 2 weeks of waiting. And if you are a heavy API user, if your company is using the new GPT-5.6 Soul via the API, this one could be a legit game changer. This is the first of its kind across any model, literally in the history of AI, that you can run a frontier AI model at legit blazing speeds. All right, so let's talk about what's new. So OpenAI announced ultra fast, its new speed tier that runs its most capable model, GPT-5.6 Soul, at up to 14 times faster than normal. So how the heck is this possible? Well, it is a specific partnership with the now public company, the chip maker Cerebras, and it generates up to 750 tokens per second, with OpenAI and Cerebras saying it's the exact same intelligence, just legit lightning speed faster. So who has access right now? So if you are in, this one is a little more select, but I think for OpenAI API customers, it's a lot of our listeners. That's why I still included this one. So it is in limited preview, but this is, y'all, especially for our larger enterprises, this has been one of the most the most highly anticipated features that I've seen in a while, right? People have been talking about this for many months. So essentially, OpenAI did have a Cerebras model before, but it was an older model. It was GPT 5.3 Codex. So it was a Codex specific model, and it was an older model. I literally just used this like yesterday still. So it's still a really good model, but it's older, but it's so blazing fast, right? When it first came out, I was just using it for computer use because it could use a computer, right? Like as an example, not to knock on, Claude, but, Claude's computer use, as powerful as it is painfully slow, right? Codex's default computer use is, in my testing, 5 to 7 times faster. So when you use a Cerebras model with it, it is like as fast as a human or faster than a human can use a computer, which for me is an exciting unlock. So why is it useful? Well, until now, if you wanted real-time speed, you had to settle for a smaller, not as capable model. So this kind of removes that trade-off. It's top tier intelligence at speed that are fast enough for live products. So, as an example, we talked earlier about the new Gemini 3.7 Flash. So this is at speed, I think technically a little faster. We'll have to wait. This has only been out for, less than 24 hours now. So we'll have to see the third-party speeds, but presumably this is going to be faster. So this is going to be delivering a level of intelligence via the API that literally the world has never seen. So I haven't even quite wrapped my brain yet around what is going to be made possible with this, but speed just matters for business. So like, as an example, if you are using this to power your agents, a 40-step task, as an example, it's going to pay that speed tax on every single step. So faster steps turn a workflow that maybe took minutes into one that takes seconds. So you can see results faster, you can make improvements faster, and you can find a good internal use case fit faster. Whereas before, it just might take longer. So who's going to find this valuable? Any large enterprise company that's building customer facing AI products where people are sitting there waiting for an answer or sitting there waiting for an agent to complete its tasks. So teams that are running long multi-step AI agents are going to find this extremely valuable as well. All right, let's go to our last one here. This one, another kind of niche one, but is super, super exciting for me. All right. So if you remember, like a year and a half ago, Microsoft had its recall product that was kind of recalled, right? Not really, but technically, right? They released it. Privacy advocates are like, you can't release this. And then it got pulled and back and forth, right? Now, I think you probably have a much better version of this in the new update that OpenAI just dropped called Computer History. So we had talked about Chronicle before. So this is just an extension or Chronicle made better. Let me break it down in simple terms. So OpenAI just released Computer History. This is a new feature that watches your activity across apps and websites on your Mac. It is Mac only right now. Sorry, Windows and Linux. And yes, OpenAI did this week release ChatGPT Work / Codex for Linux as well. But this essentially watches all your activity across apps and websites on your Mac and turns it into memories in a timeline that ChatGPT and Codex can use. So you can literally scroll through every single thing that you've done on the new ChatGPT / Codex desktop app. And you can ask things like, what was I working on before my break? Or where's that proposal doc from this morning? Or summarize yesterday for stand-up, right? Anything that you work on inside of Codex or ChatGPT Work, which for me is quite literally everything. It can notice repeated workflows, right? So it can find things that you started and didn't stop, and then it can finish it itself. That is wild. So it can not only finish work that you were doing and just forgot, or, maybe you ran into a roadblock, got busy, whatever. So this new computer history can not only finish those tasks that you started and just stopped or abandoned, but it can actually suggest skills as you go along, which for me, I talked about this on the show the other day in my the next 12 months of AI. So make sure you go check that out. That was yesterday's show. So Thursday's show went over the 19 predictions every business leader needs to hear. And one of the things I said was, lines of code is not an important metric. Tokens burned is not an important metric. One of the most important metrics, I think, for the rest of 2026 and early 2027 is how many times you are reusing skills, right? Because you are saving not only a ton of time and sharing those across your team, but also you're saving tokens technically, because you are only running the most optimized version of a workflow inside of your AI operating system that is going to bring a certain level of output or results. So now with this new computer history enabled, it is going to complete things for you, which, my gosh, I need, because normally I have 8 to 20 different, Codex threads going at once. And I forget these things a lot, but then also to suggest skills. This is really cool. So it essentially allows ChatGPT to observe and learn your activity on your computer, helping it understand your workflow, complete ongoing tasks that you might have forgotten, and then recommend those skills and automations tailored to how you use your device. So who has this right now? Any paid business plan has it right now, as well as ChatGPT Pro. So you have to go into the ChatGPT desktop app. It is Mac only, and it is off by default. So you have to turn it on. And if you are using this across your team, every person has to turn it on themselves. And obviously, this is not yet available in the EU, UK, or Switzerland. So all of those, strict privacy first companies, you're not going to have it. So who's going to find this useful? Well, this is the AI that finally knows what you did yesterday, not just what you typed into a chat box, right? So the context switching and the where was I moments, I think, are some of the biggest silent time wasters right now in knowledge work. So a real example, at the end of the day, asking for a summary of everything you worked on, or start the morning by asking ChatGPT to pick up where you stopped, or, looking at the skills that it suggested based on all the work that you did yesterday. So if you're just juggling a ton of different projects like me, if you're losing time, if you're a heavy AI user, you're really going to like that. It is a little, so this computer history builds on the Chronicle Research Preview with reduced token usage and more privacy control. So like I said, this is fresh. I haven't even used it yet because literally I had so many codex threads running. I didn't want to, download the update just yet. Chronicle did take a little bit of space on your hard drive. But this specifically, the computer history is the next iteration of that. And they did say it is a little faster and reduced token usage. All right. So that is a wrap for the 7 AI updates that you should use today, y'all. If you're not paying attention every single day, that's why this Friday show is extremely useful. All right. And a reminder, y'all, the live stream and the newsletter are taking a little break. Quick announcement. It is time to go back to school. So we're going to be doing some learning together on Everyday AI. So our Start Here series that we kicked off this year has been some of our most popular shows ever. And we've gotten a lot of comments of people like, hey, you should just run these all. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be running back the entire series, 30 episodes, 30 days. Commit to this. So we're going to be running that series back starting on Monday, starting with the very first episode. So yeah, a little break from our normal Monday to Friday schedule, but I guarantee if you stick with this series from volume 1 through volume 30 and put the work in, you'll know more about AI than like 99% of the people at your company. So it's made for beginners and advanced users alike. No jargon, no fluff, no computer science degree required. Class starts Monday. Don't be late. All right, that's a wrap. Make sure if you haven't already, go to youreverydayai.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back next time for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.